This briefing video is going to introduce the iron experiment to you. So here in this scheme we have an overview of what you'll be doing in the experiment. It's a three-step experiment, so you're doing sort of three mini reactions. So the first reaction you're doing is where you're taking iron ammonium sulfate, reacting it with oxalic acid to make iron oxalate. That's a yellow compound. And then the second reaction is where you then take some of your iron oxalates and you react it with potassium oxalate and hydrogen peroxide to make potassium oxalate. And that will give you a green compound. And then the third reaction that you're doing is you're taking iron chloride, reacting it with acetyl acetone and making iron 3 acetyl acetonate, which is a red compound. Okay, so three short experiments to make three iron compounds, one yellow, one green, one red. So the purpose of this experiment is to give you practice of being in the laboratory and performing techniques in synthetic chemistry. In particular, these techniques here, working safely in the lab. This experiment involves filtrations to isolate those solid compounds using vacuum filtration. In the second step of the reaction, you'll be adding your hydrogen peroxide in a controlled manner rather than all at once. So you're learning how to add reagents carefully to reactions. And then the third step of the reaction, you are going to be performing a hot filtration as the purification method. And then finally, you're going to be recording your experimental results in your lab book. So as part of the Prelab exercises, we have videos to show you how to perform these techniques. So do watch them. They'll ensure that you perform them correctly when you come to do the experiments in the lab. So to help you, what we've done is sort of proposed a sort of rough sort of timetable of how the experiment should pan out. So you're performing this experiment over 2 days. As I mentioned, you've got those three short steps. So the first reaction to make the yellow iron oxalate, you should be able to do that on the first morning. And then I've sort of put a nominal sort of lunch break in here, but you can have your break at any time that you want. And then in the afternoon, you'll be able to start the second reaction to form potassium iron oxalate, the green compound. And then on the second day, you can start the third synthesis in the morning to make the red compound. And we've also planned in some extra time, so if you do need a little bit longer, if you're struggling with certain steps or you need to repeat a certain step, then there is time planned in there for you to be able to do that. Okay, so in your experiment scripts, you've got all the hazards of the experiments that you're using and how you should handle and dispose of them safely. So please make sure that you do read through the scripts. But what I will do is I will sort of summarize the sort of things that you're going to be using. So if you look in your experiment script, you'll find the name of the chemical, the hazard, how you should handle it, where you can locate the item, and also how you should dispose of it safely and correctly. So this is a summary of the hazards from the experiment. It doesn't cover all the details. You do have to read the script, but just to summarize, you are handling chemicals which are flammable, like acetone, ethanol, and methanol. So you need to make sure that you don't have any sort of naked flames near your reaction when you're handling these chemicals, and also that you don't sort of have your hot plates on too hot, which could cause a spark and set these solvents on fire. You're going to be using corrosive reagents like hydrogen peroxide, oxalic acid, an iron oxalate, so you need to make sure you're wearing your protective equipment like gloves, for example, when you're handling them. And you are handling some materials that are toxic as well, like the potassium iron oxalate. Okay, so one of the key things you should do is, before you go into the lab, look through the KOSH details, but also whenever you are, before you are about to handle any of the chemicals in the lab, look for the KOSH table, look for the KOSH information in your experiment script. Then you can make sure that just before you're about to use the chemical, you know what the hazards are and you know how to handle it and use it safely. Okay, and so the final part of the briefing is just a couple of quick tips to help you through the experiment. So this relates to step 2 when you're making the green compound, and as part of this procedure you have a step where you have a brown solution and you're adding some reagents to turn it into a green solution. Now sometimes when you add your reagents, it doesn't go from brown to green. If that happens, then this is the advice that you can follow. You can add some more hydrogen peroxide to what was stated in the script until the reaction turns green, and then because you've added this extra peroxide, then you need to sort of boil off the extra water that you've added, and this is so when you cool down the solution, you get the green crystals precipitating out. If you don't do this last little bit, then you have a green solution where you get no crystals coming out. And the last tip is for the final reaction where you're performing the hot filtration. Okay, so if you're cooling your hot filtration, you should be getting sort of red crystals precipitating out. If this doesn't happen, a bit similar to the last example, it's because you've got too much solvent. So in this case, you've got too much methanol. And so what you can do is you can reduce the volume of methanol and then allow the crystals to form. However, methanol is flammable, as I've just mentioned before. So if you heat and boil off methanol on a hot plate, you will cause a fire. So instead of heating on a hot plate, use a rotary evaporator, and a demonstrator will show you how to use a rotary evaporator if you need to evaporate off your methanol. Okay, so that's the briefing for the iron experiment.